Hello and welcome to the fourth installment of Aaron Walker Art Talk. I am Aaron Walker, and today I am joined by fellow Praxis participant and artist, Sarah Iddings. Sarah,
Hey.
how are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. And yourself?
I'm doing great. And so for our first conversation today, you have chosen a conversation with death. Would you like to go ahead and explain why you chose that?
Just the concept of it just kind of fascinates me. Like, there's a lot of elements of this picture that I can see working together to be a conversation with death. And I feel like that's kind of, in a way, whether it looks like the way it's presented or not, a conversation that a lot of us have at some point in our life. And I think everybody will handle their conversation with death a little bit differently. And it just fascinated me that you decided to capture this in art form.
Well, that's kind of like what the motivation for it was. So I have been looking at these sort of classic representations of death that you'll see in the European tradition of like this skeleton that is robed in black and has like a scythe and is very menacing. He's always portrayed as like this very looming, like dark figure. And I'm like, well, is that really how like the sort of relationship with death that I would want to have or portray? Well, like, maybe not. So the way it's portrayed in a conversation with death is as more of a business relationship or perhaps like friends meeting in a cafe. Like it's very intimate. The figures are very close, smoking cigarettes and drinking drinks. And I thought that was a much more appropriate sort of relationship to death that you would have. That's something to contend with, but not something that you should necessarily be in conflict with.
Yeah, I can see that too. And something that this sort of struck me as interesting in this is that they're having a couple of beers or what have you and a cigarette. And I'm just like, that's really kind of ironic because it is so widely publicized that both of those things are bad for your health and will eventually lead to your death. And I thought it was like, just like the little bit of comedy that adds
right
to this visual.
Well, I mean, some of that I think is intentional. So like the cigarette certainly was intentional, that like it is this thing that's killing you. But I mean, we certainly don't like, I smoke cigarettes. And so if I'm smoking, I'm not, well, it depends on the day. I'm certainly not sitting there going like, I'm killing myself slowly right now. It's like, no, you're flirting with death. It's like it's very light, you know.
Which it makes sense still too, though, because they're at this dinner conversation and just kind of like, oh, hey, let's chill, let's hang out. You know, I don't want to go all the way with you, but you know, you're here, so let's get to know each other a little.
Yes, perhaps it should have been like entitled like casually dating death.
That would have been a really interesting title.
Yeah. So, Sarah, do you have any other questions?
Oh, I've been trying to figure out, I noticed that you seem to paint and produce your art on a variety of mediums. And I've been trying to figure, was this one of the cardboard pieces or what did you do this on?
So this one is actually on canvas. I actually have it right here. I'll try to show it for you just for like a size comparison.
It's much bigger than I had imagined.
A large piece, yes.
Very nice.
But yes, this is acrylic on canvas.
Oh, acrylic. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Like eventually I'm planning to shift into oil at some point, but like I've only done it like 3 oil paintings so far.
Huh. That's interesting because like the way that you did your strokes and stuff, like it reminds me of how I have seen people do oils, and I would not have guessed acrylic.
Well, thank you. I do take that as a compliment because I do think oil is it's a finer medium, right? But the style that I try to go for, well, the technical term is like impasto, right? So it's building, it's very, you use a lot of paint and very obvious strokes. I consider myself like a post-impressionist, at least in terms of the paintings, right? And so that's what the impressionists used to create that kind of effect.
I can see that. That makes sense. So did you do any like sketching of it ahead of time, or did you just like dive in with the paints on this piece?
So this is kind of one of my typical ways of approaching a painting where I'm not just doing a reference picture, right? So for some paintings, I just have a reference picture and I just paint the reference. This involves several reference pictures that are just kind of like a collage that are reassimilated on the canvas. So for instance, the skull was a reference picture, two figures sitting at a table was a reference picture, a light bulb was a reference picture. And so I sketch all of these different elements on the canvas with a graphite stick. And then I go over it from darkest to lightest with paint.
Okay, cool. And just out of curiosity, like, why did you choose to have Death wearing a glove?
Well, I think that I think Death ought to be someone to be contended with. So he's not like a frivolous person. And because of this, there's like an amount of class that goes along with that, right? There's a business suit, wearing gloves and what have you. Perhaps subconsciously, I just didn't want to do like bony fingers. I'm not sure.
That would have been a lot more work to paint and involve a whole bunch more reference pictures, I'm sure.
Right. I mean, we'll see an example of some like skeleton hands later on, like in a forthcoming episode. But yeah, not in this one.
Aha. Very cool. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions here. I felt like I did, and now it's just escaping me.
For sure.
I hate that. I think, what made you choose to have him be more of a businessman rather than someone perhaps more casual, or maybe somebody like edgy?
Right. Well, so again, I thought that it ought to be, and not just to repeat the previous answer, but like Death as someone to contend with, like a serious person. And I think Death as like a business person makes sense. I guess in part to answer this question, a better person would be like representations of the devil, right? So like I really like representations of the devil as like a handsome man in a suit, like someone that that isn't necessarily like repulsive right off the bat, but no, like evil is something that's attractive and something that like
right.
And so it's a similar concept with Death, where Death is this destructive force, and it's this thing that you have to contend with in order to be like a competent adult. But like Death as this character in a robe, this black robe with a scythe, I think that's a monster that's coming after you. That's like a horror story, right? Like Death coming after you with a scythe.
Oh, totally. Grim Reaper and all that.
So like a sort of businessman in a suit is something more that you have to like ration with in order to overcome, and not like produce fisticuffs or something like that.
That's very true. If he had been a more radical looking character, I don't think this guy would have considered sitting down to have a nice dinner and drink with him.
For sure.
Makes good sense. I can't think of any other questions on there, but
all right.
It's a really captivating piece. I found it quite fascinating.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And this isn't the case with all of my prints, but for this with all of my illustrations, but for this particular one, I actually do have prints.
Oh, cool.
And these and all of my other prints can be stored at davidaaronwalker.com.
Sweet.
And what would a podcast be without like a quick plug at the end?
Right.
All right, Sarah. So thank you. And I'm going to see you in the next episode. Okay.
All right. Have a good one.